Hello, everyone, and welcome to what I'm calling 5 for the Loremaster. I have David Haddock here. And David, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I know you guys are very busy in this lead up to PAX East. I really appreciate you taking the time out with me today.
Pleasure.
Thank you. There are some people that have been throwing me lore questions from time to time, and I keep on putting them aside because I know when I throw them to Ben, he goes, David would be best to ask that, and will ask that. So there's just some things that I want to bring all those new people that have pledged for the game over the last few months into where we are currently before the campaign starts for Squadron 42, which is the first game that's going to come out for this universe, people.
Right.
So right now, can you explain to us the government makeup what type of government is the UEE and where is it right now in its timeline? Is it in its decline or is it in its build-up or heyday?
The UEE is the United Empire of Earth. It's sort of the third iteration of humanity's government form since expanding into the stars. When they first started expanding into Mars, they sort of united because of sort of global problems, and they realized like they had this engine technology that allowed them to start looking into space and started terraforming. So they sort of unified in the United Nations of Earth was their sort of first iteration, and then as they started discovering jump points and they expanded outwards, and they started getting more planets, that title kind of ceased to be relevant because they started having different planets and it was not about nations anymore. And so they sort of transformed into United Planets of Earth, the UPE, and then it was the actions of a very ambitious military guy who sort of took control of the government, and under the sort of auspices of there was this horrible war with an alien species, and there were these Xi'an who were on the other side who were being very kind of cagey, and things were very tense. And so he managed to kind of rile that sort of fear and marshal it into creating a new position in the government called the Prime Citizen, which of course he nominated himself to take. Right. And so it was very short order that he managed to sort of marginalize the other factions. It was sort of a tribunal system originally in the UPE. He managed to marginalize the other ones and sort of put all the power into himself. And so he became the sort of first despot of humanity, and then rebranded it as the United Empire of Earth. And then that went on for a couple of 100 years through his family, who were pretty bad, and until they were finally overthrown. And although it's still known as the UEE, right now they're sort of trying to go back far the other way, so prove that they are not the bad despots that they were before. And so we're really sorry, we're better now. And but unfortunately, that's proving to be difficult. So right now, as it stands right now in the timeline, the UEE is sort of under a lot of strain. There's a lot of economic problems. They have sort of combat on one side with the Vanduul, and then on the other side they have these sort of somewhat chilly but improving relationships with the Xi'an now. And there's sort of crime, and it's a lot of problems. And so they're trying to do their best, but there's just a lot of opportunities for corruption and crime and stuff like that. So there's sort of, you can feel the weight of the empire starting to strain. And so that's sort of where we're at right now.
Awesome. And you also have this, not conflict, but this tension going between the Earth and Terra, right?
Yes. Yeah. Terra was sort of set up as this sort of new Earth because they didn't have to terraform it. It was like kind of perfect. And so, hence the name. And so, but since then, there's been sort of this divide that's been growing. During the Messer era, when things were getting really bad, Terra was sort of the one somewhat beacon of hope that was trying to kind of buck the despot. And so they actually ended up sort of kickstarting or sparking what became the revolution by one of their senators, in a really kind of audacious move, signed a peace accord with the Xi'an, which immediately put them at odds with the Messers, and so things got very tense and very chilly. And then, fortunately for them, I mean, the Messer era didn't last that much longer, so they didn't sort of get crushed. But yes, so there's sort of the Terrans who feel that they have been sort of the progressive, they are the new bastion of humanity's ideals and stuff like that, and they feel that Earth is being unfairly centralized as a sort of seat of power, and they think it's unfair because Earth was bad, they've been good, we're beyond Earth, we've moved beyond them type thing. Right. So yeah, it's a little tense right now.
I like how you have all this in your head, because obviously you're one of the people, if not the person, that's created this whole universe for us
over a long time and a lot of conversations, but yeah.
Okay. So the next piece is the government makeup. It's been described as ancient Rome, but what's really the seat of power, and what are the different levels of government underneath it, if you're able to give us that?
Well, there's part of the thing with the Messer era is that he established himself as imperator, and which is sort of, as I mentioned briefly before, there was a tribunal. It was a high secretary, high advocate, and high general that sort of divided responsibilities. The general was obviously responsible for the military forces and general security. The advocate was responsible for law and the legal system and law enforcement, and then the secretary was about infrastructure and diplomacy. And so when the Messer rose and became the imperator, he basically, the high general ascended and took up most of the power, so it became focused through that one position. So even after the Messer era ended, they kept that title. So it's still about making sure that there's still this one person, because it did work better than, the UPE was sort of mired in a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of bickering, and not a lot got done. And so they sort of kept the tentpole position of the imperator, but they instituted like term limits and stuff like that to kind of prevent, do whatever was possible to prevent a despot from seizing power. So there's still this high secretary, and there's still the high advocate who are responsible for the things, but they are, they report to the imperator, and they're sort of this sort of inner council type thing. And then, the military sort of funnels down through what's called high command, which is sort of like the Joint Chiefs. So there's a legatus for the army, a legatus for the Marines, and a legatus for the Navy, and they sort of form the high command who report to the imperator. And so basically the tribunal's been reestablished, but now there's an imperator who's sort of the head of state.
Okay. So if you look, I mean, I'm going to ask you to dwell down into something that I don't know if you do, but I wonder about this, because we're going to be living in this universe. If you place yourself in the mind of just an everyday citizen in the UEE, what's your opinion of what things, how things are going on, what's going on right now? I mean,
part of the thing has been, from the start, has always been sort of this idea of shades of gray. The UEE is not the evil empire. They're not the bastion of good. There are a lot of good people that are trying to do good things, but there are also a lot of bad people that are trying to capitalize off, the good people. So it's, depending on where you live, you could have very, very different opinions of how the UEE is, or as a government and an entity. So it would sort of depend. I mean, obviously, as we talked earlier a little bit about the Terra Earth divide, like if you're a Terran, you probably don't think it's really that good, or it's misguided. But if you are maybe born closer to Earth, or you sort of, you might feel the complete opposite. You might think that the Terrans are kind of upstarts, and that they complain, or something. It's sort of, but creating that sort of environment where you could have all these very different, and even going on the forums now, it's great to see people argue about, screw Terra, they're being like bratty kids, or down with Earth and all that type of stuff. It's fun because it just means that people are sort of latched on to ideologies that speak to them, and that there's enough of variety that you can have both exist and feel justified in their thing, their beliefs.
Okay. A lot of sci-fi novels and sci-fi IPs like to depict us as being naive and not ready for space travel. So we are 1,000 years after that, right? It's 1,000 years after we ventured into space. And we've had some issues with the Xi'ans, with the Terran, and now with the Vanduul. Are we looking at a similar situation where things were caused by accident, caused from our arrogance or from our naivety, or is it something different in this universe?
It's sort of a combination of all of them. You know, the Tovaran wars, of which there were two. I mean, both of them were actually started by the Tovaran. And again, you know, going on the forums, some people disagree with the official account of how that happened, but you know, they kind of attacked first. The Vanduul attacked first. The Xi'an, we discovered them because a terraforming corporation and sort of an imperial land grab tried to terraform a planet that they owned and had people living on, and you know, so it could have theoretically killed everybody on the planet. So that kind of sparked a hostage situation, which is a horrible way to open up any kind of diplomatic. And then everyone's cool with the Banu. No one's got a problem with them.
Banu's cool. Like Switzerland, right? They're just
they're just sort of, they kind of do their thing.
Are they nomadic? Are they? This is my own question. I'm sorry. You brought them up.
It's a good question. I mean, they have home worlds. They have planets that they live on and cities and stuff like that. I mean, a lot of their culture is about going out and finding stuff. They like to find stuff, and you know, that can be stuff that people make, or that can be stuff that they find on planets. They just sort of, they like that. They like collecting things.
Kind of like nice Ferengi.
Yeah.
Okay, that's pretty cool. All right, and of course, there's some kind of we're bringing ourselves 1,000 years forward from the last conversation. Well, not really, but where that one started. And right now we have this conflict with the Vanduul. And I know that people could go out there and read it, and you know that people like me are going to read it every day, and the majority of the people are going to go in there and try to fight. What caused the current conflict with the Vanduul?
No one knows. It was basically, there was an expedition to try and, you know, as I mentioned before, the earlier kind of land rush type thing where terraforming was very popular and there was sort of a rapid expansion. So there was a campaign to move kind of far. We call it west just because it's easier to, you know, think of it as sort of a map like that, but it's probably not accurate. But that's set up in a system called Orion, and it was basically just an attack. Like the colony, one of the colonies just sort of disappeared, and they didn't know what happened, so they sent somebody to go look into it, and it had just been destroyed. But it didn't make sense that it was pirates because, you know, they didn't attack the comm towers, which seemed weird because normally pirates attack comm towers. But so they got wiped out, and so it turns out that was sort of the first shot of Vanduul contact, and so it was.
And timeline? How many hundreds of years between that and where we are?
I think that was 27.
So it's a couple hundred years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe late 27th century, maybe early 28th.
Yeah. And at this point, folks, I will point you to a wonderful site that has the timeline of how everything has transpired. A wonderful person who I will credit in the show notes below has put that together for us, and it is a great place to go for this. And there's also something called Scam Star Citizen's Admirer's Manual, which has everything in it.
Yeah.
So can you give us, like, I get the idea from talking to you at DragonCon and from talking to some other people that the Vanduul are kind of like those, like the barbarian tribes that were attacking Rome in its fall. So what is their makeup? How are they put together? Is there a home world? Is there a central government?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, no one knows.
You do.
Well, yeah. But because there's never been sort of any kind of formal diplomatic interactions with them, you know, humanity knows very, very little about them. So just that they attack, you know, and they attack mercilessly, and they harvest, you know, they harvest planets to build on their ships and stuff like that. And so they're very nomadic. They exist in clans, and they roam around, and they hit systems, and they hit planets, and they drop harvesters down to grind up and absorb as raw materials and stuff like that. So no one really knows. I mean, part of it, and part of the fun about a lot of this stuff is, and I mean, this is the most obvious with what we've always said about, having jump points that the backers can discover is, we want to not explain everything.
Good.
We want there to be stuff for the backers and the players to discover, and so they're feeling like they're contributing to the history of the universe, and it doesn't feel just sort of static, that they're just sort of running around and existing while bigger things that we control are happening. So they can kind of feel ownership of that sort of thing. I mean, the thing I always kind of say is, the Vanduul have mastered space travel. They can use jump points. They build ships. So they're not idiots. They are calculating. They're smart. So
and vicious.
And very mean, yeah.
Okay, very mean, because that brings us to the last viewer question, which is, this person, you met her at Dragon Con, so she's looking for that one Hobbs-like, and Hobbs is a character from the Wing Commander series introduced in the Secret Missions pack. She's looking for that one, like, there has to be a nice Vanduul somewhere. And from what I understand, we've not even had verbal communication or anything with them. Does this exist? Is it something that you have in your mind, or is it something that we'll see in the future, or no comment?
I have an answer, but I'm going to go no comment.
Okay.
Again, it's one of those things that, like, what people have to go on is the fact that they are mean and tend to strike without any kind of context or reason to. That's just what they do. So. Again,
no mercy.
Yeah.
Okay.
They are pretty vicious. But that being said, we'll have to see. Once you guys jump in.
I appreciate that. And what I'd like you to do before you answer my last question is just to tell me, where are we at the start of the campaign without giving anything else away? Like, what are the conditions that are going on that you can tell us?
Well, I mean, the best way to keep track of it is actually the news updates that we release on Tuesday, because we're seeding a lot of stuff in those that are very important and in setting up the environment for the game.
Okay,
so that's sort of where we drop. I've mentioned on other things, just sort of. We'll sometimes drop design stuff in there, but a lot of it is just building up. So you guys, it's the same idea as the time capsules. It's you guys are along for the ride, so you're seeing the things unfolding. And so when it goes live, you know exactly the context of everything.
Okay. And the last piece is, and this is maybe something that you can tell us. I don't know. I do a news show, and when the game goes live, it's going to have to move from production cycle to what's going on in game. Mm-hmm. Now, I know that Sandy has put together some lead-ins for the Empire Report, I guess it's called.
Yeah.
What's the current news structure? Is it kind of government-run right now? Are there independent news services in your mind?
There are. Yeah, there's a handful. I mean, there's as far as sort of periodical news organizations, we have there's the Terra Gazette, which is sort of obviously based out of Terra.
Right.
Has a much more independently minded. We're very progressive, and we're the people's type periodical. There is the New United, which is more of the blue blood, but it's definitely not government owned. It used to be during the Messer era. It became a sort of propaganda mouthpiece for them, and so after the Messers fell, they tried to really break away from that. They've been trying to do fair and even reporting, and then you have people like Parker Terrell who are out there with their sort of pirate radio stations and stuff like that. So there's a good amount of variety that you can come across, and none sort of official UEE sanctioned places.
Okay, awesome. And we also have my own UEE sit rep for Citizen Report, which is hopefully going to take place. I take your weekly news stories and I try to put them into context, and that's something I played with for a while when Mike Moreland was still doing Galactic Inquiry. Now that he's gone at Descendant Studios, I'm trying to figure out a way to bring that back, so that would be fun. All right, David, you're amazing. Say whatever you can to my community, and then we'll close the show out.
Thank you, everyone. It's great to talk to you, and I'm trying to be better about my Ask a Dev.
Yeah, well, ask a dev. Well, I'm going to grab you or Will, hopefully. I've asked you, and I know it's tough because you guys are under the gun for a lot of things. But if I could grab you once a month, that would be great. And if we can get that done, guys, start leaving your questions for David below and keep them out of the things that we don't want to know about. We're not going to give spoilers here. And with that, yeah, thank you. And with that said, you all be safe out there, and I'll talk to you soon.